I'm going to be talking about, first of all, thanks for coming to the conference. This is awesome. Sort of a grassroots DevOps conference. I hope we can do this again next year. I'm going to be talking about microservices and DevOps and culture and kind of building on some of the things that we heard about in the last couple sessions and the keynote especially. But I'm also going to talk about how open source, not just open source projects, but open source culture fits into DevOps and fits into some of this, the way we can architect our applications, microservices, and whatever. And then I'm also going to show a demo of some of the technology that I work on in the open source. Again, if the demo gods are kind enough, we'll see if we can get to that and through it. So my name is Posta. I am a principal architect at Red Hat. I work, the genesis of where I've come from is really architecting SOA systems and integration with ESBs, and then moving into open source integration technology. And as you might know, architecting distributed systems has a lot to do with how they interact with each other and how dependencies are made with each other. I spent a lot of time working at one of the big web scale, internet unicorn companies. So I got to see firsthand how SOA or microservices works, not just from a technology standpoint, but from a culture standpoint, from an organization standpoint. And when I first saw it, I was like, oh, this is great. I get to work with these great people, this great company. Everybody knows them. They're the four leaders of SOA. And I get there and I look at what they have, and I'm like, can you give me like an architecture diagram and an overview of what this really is? And it to me at the time, it just seemed like a gigantic mess. It was a chaos almost. So let's go into a little bit about why it did seem like chaos and why it's not, and some of the foundational prerequisites for doing the type of distributed system computing we're talking about when we talk about microservices. Who's heard the term microservices? Okay, that's what I thought. It's not unlike the hype that was generated around SOA, and before that, and ESBs and enterprise application integration and Corba and all this hype. And each one of those hype technologies, including microservices to some extent, promises business agility and being able to change and being able to scale and being able to keep up with market trends and so on and so forth. But I feel like, and maybe some of you in the room can refute or corroborate what I'm saying, that I feel like SOA and its predecessors had a lot of undelivered promises. And so when we think about microservices, who's to say that we're not going to just repeat the same thing, but maybe even a little worse. Now we're making services smaller, and they still have to talk to each other. So we might be going down the wrong path. I don't know. But I think to really understand that story and whether or not it will be successful for your organizations is maybe to understand a little bit about the market dynamics and the way companies are organized today, and how that plays a big part on how you actually implement your architectures. The way companies used to market to us directly through TV and legacy media has completely changed. Right now we can go to Twitter and voice our displeasure with whatever, an airline or home improvement company or whatever, if the service was unsatisfactory or whatever. And on the flip side, if you find good services, new services that you really like Uber and or Lyft or Zappos or whatever, you can go on the same social media, and that, the fact that you like it ripples across the social media unlike anything before. Now, you take the confluence of technology and how easy it is to get started with some of the technology frameworks, Node.js and anything on the JVM, and go to EC2, and for a few pennies you can start to build some things out and see if it works. The barrier to entry to technology is very low. You take that, and companies are really worried. Big organizations legacy organizations are really worried because this technology can come and go, and it doesn't harm anything. And these social networks can just ripple. If something comes up and is really good, these social networks can just carry it out and carry it through. So ultimately, I love this quote, former CEO of GE. If change outside of your organization is happening faster than it is on the inside, then there's going to be trouble. If you're not keeping up, if you're not running fast enough and keeping up, then you're falling behind. And okay, so we just talked about technology, and we're here for the technology conference. We like talking about software. Software delivers a lot of this new innovation, and that's great, right? Software is soft. We can change it. It's malleable. We can mold it, and we can adapt with the business. It's the whole point. But the past has shown that we don't think about it like that. We think about it like an assembly line or the waterfall model. We think about designing and building software as a factory where we have requirements from on high, those trickle down, and then we build it. 18 months later, we have a product. If we have to change it, that's a problem. But companies, we're adapting Agile, we're adapting Scrum. We understand that we need to change some of the way we develop and build software, right? So that stuff is not new. But even then, Agile, Scrum, extreme programming, these methodologies are giving some benefit. They're forcing developer teams to look at the problems and solve them a different way. But they're still not giving the full benefits of what we keep talking about. We want an agile, flexible company. Maybe that's because the way our companies have always been structured have always been for making products, right? More stuff, phones, microwaves, TVs, cars, whatever. We take this amount of input, we run it through a factory, step-by-step processes that continuously churn out the same crap over and over and over. And this works, right, if you're building products. But what happens in a market like ours, we get saturated with products. We've got all kinds of crap. I got a garage full of crap that my wife would like me to sort through. We get saturated with this stuff. So how do companies go about differentiating themselves and creating value when we're at this point? And the answer is service, customer experience, whether or not I'm enjoying using your service. Companies like Uber and Airbnb, they don't even have any product. They don't have any inventory, but they've created an experience. So for example, Uber, going from point A to point B, they've created this experience that is far better than, I don't want to have to call the cab company and fumble around with cash and credit cards. Every time I go to Atlanta, the cabbie steal my credit card number. But so with Uber, you just jump in the car and go. And it's a great customer experience. Zappos is the same thing. Nordstrom's is actually organized in such a way that they do have departments, but you walk in there and an individual rep can walk you throughout the whole store. They're not siloed into, well, this is the shoe department, I can't help you with that. So if we're talking about how are your companies going to be delivering value, and we agree that we're moving into a service and customer experience mode of value, our companies were not built for that. Ultimately, our companies were built so that we can churn out crap as fast as possible. Customer experience involves variables and context. When I call a customer service representative, maybe a telco or something, and I get greeted with a voice automated system that starts explaining to me all these things that I can do, but I don't want to do any of them, that introduces a level of variability. And our companies have always been designed to say, well, let's minimize variability. Let's break things down into small specializations, small boxes, and put people into these boxes. And that way we'll move fast, we'll be efficient. So that's problematic because the more you specialize people, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't, But I'm just saying what happens is when you specialize people and you force them into these little boxes, they lose sight, number one, of the purpose of the organization, what you're doing. They lose sight of the big picture. They lose sight of what Joe Schmo is doing in the box next to them because they don't really care. Whatever they do, they just throw it over the fence anyway. And more importantly, these boxes and the way that we communicate introduces more synchronization points, more channels of communication. Jeff Bezos said it best. He said, communication sucks. We don't want more communication. So instead of thinking about our companies as machines, our companies are actually made up of people. If we start thinking about people and how the structure within the organization can benefit having groups of people work with each other, maybe we start to think about the organization a little bit differently. So what exactly am I saying? If we start to think about companies as groups of people, if we start to think about how people interact with each other, people have emotions. We talked about empathy earlier in the conference. People have thoughts. People have passions. People genuinely like helping other people. If we are able to harness some of that and use that to drive innovation, use that to drive the direction of the company, maybe we start to see something that looks a little bit more like what's called a complex adaptive system. So I'm not going to talk too deep about the theory behind it, but basically what it is a bunch of autonomous agents that interact with the environment. The environment is typically as we start to move into how this applies to technology, some kind of a platform. But there's no top-down central planning. Each individual autonomous agent has a purpose and looks out for its purpose. And together, the way that the individual autonomous, examples would be like, have you seen those National Geographic videos where you have, hundreds of thousands of birds that are flying around in unison? Basically what they're trying to do is trap insects that are around. They're trying to gather up the insects. But not one bird is saying, hey guys, let's go right, let's go left. The insects are over here. They're all autonomously driven because they want to eat. They have a purpose. Cities are another example. We don't typically have top-down, everyone, you're going to build your life over here and you're going to start this business over here. They provide a platform. They provide roads, electricity, water, and there's some building codes and so on, but typically we're fairly autonomous in cities, and cities grow and they innovate and they change and they adapt. So if you've heard about microservices and if you've seen microservices talks, you've probably seen this quote. This is the so-called Conway's Law, that organizations are going to design systems the way that organizations are structured. And without fully understanding that our organizations were not innately structured to do the type of microservice development that we're talking about, or SOA, or whatever you want to call it, without understanding that piece, we might end up going down the path where we either make things worse or at least not improve and spend a bunch of money. So the cold hard truth, in my opinion, is that Netflix, Amazon, any of these other internet scale unicorn companies, the successes of microservices is not that they're using flat class loaders if you're doing JVM stuff, or that they're using a particular cloud platform, although the technology is very interesting and does contribute to some of this. But the real success stories, the real truth is that these are stories of organizational success, the way these organizations organize themselves. The technology that they use facilitates this. But the fact that these organizations are built this way, and they didn't just get there, they iterated and evolved to get there. So much that they resemble the complex adaptive system theory that I mentioned in a way that you walk up, like I said, I started at Amazon or I was working there and I said, hey guys, give me a just a quick high-level overview, and they're like, there is no quick high-level overview. Everyone just kind of does their own thing. The architecture looks like this. Adrian Cockcroft from Netflix, he said that they really have no idea what their organizational structure looks like. But they're one of the most innovative companies. Now, what does this have to do with anything? Because I talk to people, I visit clients every week. Again, thanks for having this conference in Phoenix so I can be home with my kids. But I talk to customers every week. We talk about DevOps, we talk about microservices, we talk about all this stuff. But what does all the stuff that I laid out beforehand even mean? So if we start to look at some of those communities, those adaptive communities where innovation just sort of emerges, it's not planned from top down, and we compare to that, one of the ones sitting right in front of us is the open source communities. Open source works like this. There's not one person that sits on top and says, okay, Apache Software Foundation, you do that. GitHub, okay, let's get these people over here and do that. There's not a central planning or coordination. It's people who are driven, who have a purpose. I work on a project called ActiveMQ. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's an open source messaging platform. That product, that community formed because people didn't want to pay IBM and TIBCO all this insane amounts of money. They wanted to do it an open way, get people to collaborate, and build a better product that way. The CEO of Red Hat, the company that I work at, wrote an awesome book about these underlying principles and how you transform your organization to look a little bit more open. It's called Open Organization. And some of the things that you would take back to working in your own companies is things like transparency. Jason, when he talked about chat ops and using Slack and putting everything. So in the open source communities, that's exactly what we do. Everything's on IRC. Everything, if it wasn't on the mailing list, it didn't happen. That way you get feedback from everybody. Autonomy, individual projects are able to go off and do what they think is best for whatever their purpose is. And that way they learn. If you have a purpose, you're able to learn things better. You're able to experiment and try things out. So they fail, whatever. But that's the culture that we're talking about. Innovation doesn't just happen because you've planned it. You take a bunch of steps that you had no idea that you were going to take, and then maybe, if you're lucky, you get somewhere. So will microservices help me? Who develops on, let's see, the developers, and who are the developers? We do this in every talk, all right. And who are the platform or the operations folks? Okay. And I run into customers that say, well, we're just going to use Spring Boot, and we're going to be, how many JVM? Sorry, I'm from JVM background. How many Node.js? Python? Couple? Okay, cool. But so my background is typically JVM-based languages. I love Python. But so switching off to a specific technology, I'm going to use Spring Boot, and then I'm going to do microservices. That isn't going to help you. That, in my opinion, I don't think is going to help you. So what is microservices then? Microservices is a way to organize teams and allow autonomy within those teams to scale, to really get to scale. Because like I said, if you're in those boxes and you're siloed and specialized, then you increase your synchronization between those boxes because you have to coordinate to get things done, and that doesn't scale. Anybody that's written a highly scalable software system knows that lock-free programming is more scalable than lock-based programming. So the purpose is for greater scalability, more adaptive organizational structure, and to be able to deliver software a lot faster and flexible, and that's what we're talking about, trying to be flexible. So you do microservices when you have a scaling problem. And when I say microservices, I don't mean small pieces of functionality. I mean microservices is the way that Netflix and Amazon are doing microservices. You have a scaling problem. You have that nasty organizational complexity. you have a need to deliver software faster and be more adaptive and agile and whatever. The benefits, I'm trying not to bore you guys too much with microservices, what it is, because you guys are bombarded with all that stuff. But some of the benefits, right, there's, you can move faster, you can scale independently, you can understand services easier, you can replace them wholesale if you need to, use different technology stacks and all that stuff. But operationally, there are drawbacks. It's not all utopia. You end up with systems that are very, very complex, harder to understand and debug, and never mind the resource overhead, and network overhead, and tooling, and all that stuff. So if you're able to apply, and I think of DevOps as a way to help bring the organization along in the right direction from the bottom up. You do need top-down support in your organizations, and hopefully if the CIOs, CTOs understand the direction of technology and the convergence of all the stuff, they'll help you out too. But DevOps is a way to bring some of these foundations and start transforming the organizations a little bit from the bottom. But they need a platform. Technology, software developers will need a platform. And this platform, well, when you build microservices, when you build these autonomous microservices, they need a way, basic things that you can't get away from. Service discovery, configuration, CI/CD, continuous integration, like the palette folks, or the totem folks showed earlier. API management and security and key handling and logging and metrics and monitoring, all this stuff. And you got to have a chaos monkey. So in this demo that I'm going to show you, the platform that I'm helping to work on, we'll look at some of this stuff as an out-of-the-box feature of the platform. Now, what you actually go off and develop is up to whatever your guys' purpose is, whatever the reason is that you guys are around in the software and the IT organization. So everything for us, and when I say us, I mean Red Hat, but everything for us starts with Docker. Docker is the de facto container engine, the de facto API for integrating or talking with Linux containers. And it's also becoming the de facto way of packaging your applications. No more do operations folks have to be experts at RPM, Maven, NPM, Ruby gems, everything goes into a single box, and that box is handed over to operations, theoretically. But so that simplifies the tooling. That simplifies, you don't have custom scripts for all these different types of frameworks and languages, platforms. Everything goes into a box, and then you deploy it. But you need something to start the deployment. You need something to check to make sure that these applications are alive. You need to put them on the right boxes. You need to have networking and so forth between them. So that's where the Kubernetes project comes in. Who's heard of Kubernetes? Cool. Kubernetes is a project started by Google based on their internal container orchestration engine. This is sort of the third iteration of a container orchestration engine. But they decided to open source it and get community help. And we at Red Hat, we are in both of the communities. So for Docker, we're the second leading contributor. Obviously, the first is going to be Docker, the company. And in Kubernetes, we're the second leading contributor, the first being Google. So we're heavily invested in these technologies. Both of those technologies form the foundation of our developer platform called OpenShift. And now OpenShift takes containers, takes the orchestration of the containers, abstracts that stuff away, and lets you focus on it as a developer. So you commit your code, and it starts all of the build process, creating the Docker images and putting them out onto machines and so on. It also has software-defined networking, because at some point, once you deploy your applications, you're going to want to interact with them. And command line tooling and all this. So this sets the foundation for a platform that developers can use. Now, the project that I like and contribute to, and is sort of my passion, and when I get time for open source stuff, is called Fabric8. Fabric8 started off as a JVM cluster manager type application. It's similar in spirit. Have you heard of the Netflix open source stack, that kind of stuff? It was similar in spirit to that. And then we started, when Docker came out, we started to say, okay, well, let's not only do JVM stuff, let's do Docker stuff. And then we realized, wait a minute, well, now we're just recreating Kubernetes, and we're not going to be able to do that as well as the Kubernetes community. So we decided to adopt Kubernetes and Docker under the covers. So the API that Fabric8 depends on is Kubernetes. So you can run it on OpenShift, which has Kubernetes. You can run it on Azure. You can run it on Google Container Engine. You can run it in CoreOS. The Kismatic folks have Kubernetes. We've even written a Kubernetes API implemented in Java. That'll allow you to run this sort of technology on operating systems outside of Linux. So Fabric8, what is it? It sits on top of your container orchestration layer, and it brings things like automated one-click continuous integration, continuous delivery. You can layer API management on top of it. It has metrics and logging and Chaos Monkey, and so it has a bunch of stuff that would be familiar to you if you were at a Netflix or an Amazon in terms of the tooling, but it's open source and is available to anyone. So Fabric8 has a web console that brings all this stuff together, and in the beginning of the demo, that's what we'll see. We'll see some of the components that on the UI side of how that comes together. And then what we're going to do is create a project and watch what Fabric8 does, right? So Fabric8 will first, when you create a project, it'll first spin up a Git repository for you. This could be GitHub. In the demo, we'll use an out-of-the-box GitHub-like open source project that we spin up internally inside the platform called GOGS. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's kind of like GitLab, but a little bit nicer. GOGS. So then it'll set up a Jenkins workflow for you that implements whichever CI/CD pipeline that you choose. It'll also set up integrations with Nexus. So all your build artifacts for Java applications, for example, none of this is specifically tied to Java, but since background is JVM, then this is sort of the stuff we started off with. We'll automatically push artifacts into Nexus. It'll set up a chat room for you, but it's not tied to the specific chat room that we use. It could be Slack or whatever that you use, and allow you to integrate your promotions, so your build promotions. When you start doing continuous integration and continuous delivery, you're probably not going to do what Zappos does and just push shit straight to production or Amazon. You're probably going to have gates and promotion steps. And so with this tooling, the promotion stuff is sort of built in. You can go to the chat room, go to Slack, whatever, and approve builds or get alerts when new builds are ready. So how are we doing on time? This goes till when? 11:30? We still have a little bit of time. Or 11:20? Whatever it is. Okay. Now, this is a live demo. Can you guys, it's all kind of small, huh? So we'll come here real quick. But if you come here to fabric8.io, here's the project. We got all kinds of videos. I think maybe even this demo that I'm going to do is kind of posted here. The Chaos Monkey stuff. But all of the documentation is pretty good. It's open source community. We're continually trying to improve it. But feel free to jump in and help out. We're always open to people contributing and getting into it with us. So here is the default console. Can I move this? Here. Here's the default console. This is basically a Kubernetes UI. So we can see some of the core constructs that Kubernetes knows, replication controllers and pods and services and that kind of stuff. And I can talk a whole nother day on that. But let's breeze through it really quickly. I'm on the apps page. If I click on run, I'll get greeted to this library of apps that we can run, that of which I ran this one. I ran this C delivery app, which is what brings in Gogs and Nexus and Jenkins and Let's Chat and all this stuff. But I could run API man if I want to do API management. If I want to do some Apache Camel development, I can run the iPaaS apps, all the logging and the Chaos Monkey and that kind of thing. And so what that's going to do is spin up a bunch of Kubernetes pods that the Fabric8 platform then integrates together. All of these pieces are going to be integrated together. If I look at the different hosts, I'm running locally on my machine here. The diagram is kind of, depending on how complex this gets, you can get a visualization and you can sort of narrow down the visualizations of what services are talking to what services. But so when I started that C delivery app, Fabric8 created Garrett, a Garrett service for Git review or for code reviews. It created Gogs. Let's click into Gogs. So I told you Gogs was kind of like GitHub. It implements a similar API so that you could just swap out and go to GitHub if you like, or use GitHub internally, or the architecture of it is such that you could build out a GitLab API as well. If I do, we see that I don't have any repositories here. So what we're going to do is create a new project, but we're going to do it through Fabric8. We're not going to. I mean, we can do the same thing directly through Gogs or on your command line and push it up to Gogs. I can click over here and check out Jenkins. It automatically bootstraps the Jenkins for us. It bootstraps Nexus, if you're familiar with Java artifact repository stuff, and it also boots up a Let's Chat. Now, this is not tied to Let's Chat, like I said. The back end is swappable. You can swap it for Slack or whatever chat ops type tool you want to use. I don't know if hold on, just remember this. So, all right, this is not part of the demo. I just forgot to do this. Okay, so it also sets up this chat room for you, and or integrates with the chat room. And there's nobody here except me and the Fabric8 bot. Now, if I come over here to the console, click on projects, and do a sign in. There's no applications, no project or anything created here. If I click create project, I will give this a name, Iterate.Foo. So I'm just naming the project. I'm gonna opt to build a Java base. I'm gonna build a project from a Maven catalog, Maven archetype. Execute that. I'm gonna choose which type of project. So this is just a template, a project template. I'm going to pick a CDI, just some application, and click execute. Now, depending on, oh, awesome. Thank you, demo gods. Now so the project is created. Now what that means is that internally in Fabric8 that it knows about this project. It knows it needs a Git repository, it knows it needs to connect things up with Nexus. But now we're going to choose what sort of CI/CD flow we want. And these are completely customizable, and each flow might be a little bit different, right? Some flows you want these groups of people to have Git or source code review. So you'll say, well, I want to enable code review. Or this one over here, this one's a little more complicated. We need this promotion step. So we write our flows in Jenkins, the Jenkins workflow DSL. And then and just plug this into Fabric8 and allow Fabric8 to create this automatically. So if I click on that, just leave it like that. And let's connect up to the default and say execute. Now here's where the demo gods, we gotta pray. Okay, so now this created the project, it created the GOGS repository here. Iterate foo. Here's my Java application. It created a Jenkins workflow build here, and this thing is coming along. And now what this is going to do, and we can see the steps in a second. Let's click here to make sure it's doing this. It's building in traditional Maven Java download the internet and. Okay, so it's still continuing to do that. We should then see, once the build's completed, it'll run tests, it'll deploy it into a new Kubernetes or OpenShift project, or Kubernetes namespace is really what it is. And then it'll go to the chat room, Slack or whatever, let's chat in this example, and tell everyone, hey, I have a new build ready for promotion to production. It's a canary release, and do you approve it? And then whoever, the authorized people in the chat room, whether it's the entire development team or it's just operations teams, they can go in there and just from the chat room approve it. There's other flows where we've integrated with Gerrit, so that Gerrit, which is a code review tool to begin with, that is the gate. That's the part that does the approval and authority to move forward. The tests are real integration tests, where we're actually spinning up the JVM and putting it into Docker and putting it into Kubernetes, running our tests against that, and then passing or failing or whatever. So we're still going. I didn't realize how long this would take. But so now, once we've deployed it into our QA environment, we can also deploy it into prod after we approve it, and then we can also run our Chaos Monkey app, and that should go through and destroy the app every once in a while, and then Kubernetes and the whole framework will bother to bring everything back up the way it's supposed to be. So that completed. If we go to Let's Chat, I see that there's a notification here. If I click on that, this tells me that a particular version of Iterate foo is ready for production release. If I come over here and actually look at it in QA, change the namespace to be our staging grounds we should see one app here. Now if I come back to Let's Chat and say, okay, go ahead, just copy that. Send it on its way. Okay, proceeding. Then we should see the Jenkins workflow continue, and this will be deployed into production. We can go over to apps, and I didn't start the Chaos Monkey. Let's start that up. Yeah, we'll just kill everything. Now if we come into so this will only kill things in there. 1 second. Wanted it to run here. Do another Chaos Monkey inside of, no. Oh, namespace, default, run. All right. Give that a second. We should see Chaos Monkey is starting. Now Chaos Monkey is going around killing pods. And we should see pods being recycled in we got more chaos. We should see that from our replication controllers, the restarts. So all right, we've started taking down some of the pods here. And the replication, so it's built into Kubernetes, it's built into the platform that if a container goes away, then Kubernetes will notice it and bring it back up. So our application made it to production. We've got monkeys killing everything, and that's the end of my presentation. Thank you, guys.